Hi, welcome. Hope Zvara here with Core Functional Fitness and Yoga by Hope Zvara. And today we're going to be working on one pose, and it's a tribute and a combination between figure 4 and also chair pose. And so for many people, chair pose is this pose where it's like they come into it and they're just kind of hoping that it's as good as it can be. For many people, it looks a lot like this or a lot like this. And so really understanding why we can and cannot get into chair pose has a lot to do with the success of chair pose. And so first of all, we want to look at the lower body. When our calves are restricted and tight, Achilles tendon are restricted and tight, that's going to limit us the ability to sit back into our hips rather than forward into our knees. The knees are not a good place for our weight. We want to be able to sit back into the hips. So working with something like a functional Warrior 1 calf stretch, which I do have a video to, bending and straightening the back knee, keeping the heel on the floor, is going to be able to create some length in the calf muscle, which will make it easier to sit back in chair. But also calf restriction is linked to pelvic floor dysfunction. So having a restricted calf will also make it twice as difficult for you to effectively use your pelvic floor. Secondly, when we're working with a floating figure 4 in chair pose, we want to think about the direction of the hips. Now, the more restricted I am through the hips and glutes, sacral area, the more restricted I'm going to find myself in this pose, and hence the more misalignment I'm going to create. Now, when we're working with a pose like this, the SI joint is something we want to keep in our thought process. And for many people, they sit back into this posture and they're focusing on 1, going deep, and 2, they're not really aware of the direction in which their hips are going. So if anything, you know you're tight in chair pose, you know your glutes or hips are tight, I'm going to suggest either going against a wall, either sitting your hips back into the wall, or also using a chair or something to put your hands onto for support. So let's first get into chair, and then let's practice with that floating figure 4. Turning the toes forward, first I want to encourage you to find pelvic neutral. So pubis bone and hip bones run parallel with the wall that you're facing. This is really important because this is going to allow you to recruit the pelvic floor muscles and allow there to be a balance between gluteal action and pelvic floor action. Try not to let the glutes just take over. Really make sure those inner core muscles are firing and creating some nice strength. Secondly, I'm going to start with my feet just at a very comfortable hips distance. If you want to touch them together, great. If you want them a little bit wider, that's fine. But eventually, one foot's going to be coming up off the floor anyways. If I turn sideways on the exhalation, and again, remember, we're sitting back, not forward into the knees. So as you exhale, I'm actually going to have you come into it through a hinge at the hips first, rather than through a bend at the knees. So exhale, fold your torso about 45 degrees forward, then shoot your hips back and bring your weight into your heels, so your toes can tap dance if necessary. So again, as you look down, I'm able to comfortably see my toes, and there's no stress and weight into my knee joints. So as I come back, again, that restriction through the lower leg, and also some tightness through the glutes, may restrict that action of sitting back. I want to suggest possibly coming into figure 4 on the floor first to help be able to create a little bit more openness. So as I find that chair pose, pelvic core contracts. So now when I engage my deep pelvic core muscles, then I'm feeling my gluteal muscles contract. It's not the other way around. So as you create that contraction, I want you to keep, I'm going to work mirror image, your right hip turning back rather than swinging out to the side. So there's a lot of internal and external hip strength and stability here, outer glute and lower glute. As I bring my left foot up off the floor and then cross that ankle over the knee, 1, flex the foot, and 2, again, my hips are going straight back rather than off to the side. I want to suggest kind of calming your ego and bringing your hands to your thighs momentarily. Use your left hand to externally rotate your left thigh as you sit back. It's going to create a little bit better stretch. Now, no dumping of the belly. I know it looks kind of like I am, but being 6 months pregnant, you kind of do look like that a little bit. So again, but still contract the pelvic core. And as I sit back, I'm going to notice on my right side a better stretch, but also a lot more strength that I wouldn't have cultivated otherwise. I can also take my right hand and just gently roll that right thigh out as well, continuing to sit back rather than forward into the knee. Again, the knee is not a good place for body weight unless you're kneeling. And then finally, either hands at heart, no dumping of the belly. There should not be an excessive curve in the lower back. Arms at cactus, palms face in. As I draw the arms back, no flaring of the ribs. Or finally, arms alongside the ears as I sit back. The more I can contract my pelvic core, the more length I'm going to feel in my lower back. Let's take 2 breaths here. Focus on contracting the pelvic core. Hands to heart. Inhale, sit tall, and release the leg. Awesome. Let's just try the other side just for the sake of practice. Left toes turn forward. Remember again, the direction of the hips is really, really important. If you're a yoga teacher or a student and you're someone with SI joint issues or hip issues, this is really something to pay attention to. So again, toes are forward, hips are squared forward, pelvic neutral. Exhale, I'm going to tip forward first, then bend my knees and sit back. For those of us that are more restricted in the lower body, going deeper often means folding at the waistline further. I don't want you to do that. It's not that we're upright, just keep the 45-degree angle. As I shift my weight over onto the left leg, try to minimize either 1, the shift in the hip, or 2, this excessive lean. The better strength in the hip, glute, and pelvic core you have, the less lean you're going to feel. So toe comes up, and then cross. I'm going to use my hands, roll the thighs out as I sit back, keeping my left hip pointing straight back rather than out to the left. Grounding through the feet, hands to heart, broaden the chest without flaring the ribs. Now engage the pelvic core as you sit back. Inhale through the nose. Exhale. At a minimum, I can just hold on to the leg, hold on to a chair, sit back into a wall. Cactus arms, again, keep the core strong to open up the space between the ribs and the hips. Finally, arms come alongside the ears. Drop your shoulders, 2 breaths. Sit back rather than forward. Exhale, hands to heart. Inhale, stand tall, and release the leg. I love combinations where we create balance, core strength, and stability all together into one unit. But it does matter how you practice. So slow down and take your time, and I know you'll be successful. Namaste.